Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, and welcome. I'm Michelle Perkins, the host of the Money and You show, where we talk about things related to your relationship with money, to creating work you love so you can earn money in a way that makes you happy and helps you to feel fulfilled, whether that's a job in an organization or working as an entrepreneur. Maybe both. These days, we have a lot of people working jobs and working side hustles. So however you make that up, that's where Limit-Free Life really got its name, so that you do that from an authentic place where, you know, you are being you in your work. And so we like to talk about your relationship with money because sometimes that has such a profound impact on whether you do the things that you love or how you do those things, and if you feel free enough to be able to do that. So those are some of the things that we talk about here on the Limit-Free Life show, or I'm sorry, it used to be Limit-Free Life show. It is now Money and You. So anyway, I have a fantastic guest with me today, someone who you will love listening to and enjoy her advice and some of her stories. I can't wait to introduce her. Before we start, I want to talk about success a little bit. I had a couple of great success stories that came to me from some clients, some former clients now. And it was interesting because one of them just got what she called her reach job. And I loved that because I when you're a student, you go for kind of your reach school, that one that's a little bit out of the realm of, kind of your perception of possibility, but you want to go ahead and go for it anyway. And she was interviewing. It was a long process to go from where she was to even getting interviews and then finally to getting job offers. And she landed her reach job, which I was super happy about. And she termed it that. So probably because she has a couple college age kids. And so I loved that term. And then I heard from a former client who was actually looking at grad school and in something very complicated like quantum information science, and he had gotten into one of his reach schools, and so that seemed to be the theme of the week. And so it kind of just reminded me to have a reach option, to have a reach job, or even a reach vision for your business, or a reach school if you're going back to school. So to really push that vision a little further than you might even think is possible. If it doesn't happen, that's okay. But always good to have that out there to go for. And with that, I'm going to introduce our guest who helps business owners really go for their big visions and help them to achieve those visions. Her name is Kat Rippey. And Kat works with CEOs, founders, and leaders of emerging mid-sized businesses to scale successfully through their people. As a sought-after leadership expert, Kat brings tremendous value to leaders in managing the complexity of today's demands. Her humanistic approach puts the leader front and center to effectively connect and influence the dynamic needs of employees, customers, boards, and other stakeholders, culminating in a healthy culture and notable impact. Kat is the CEO of Energize Leadership, a full-service organizational effectiveness consulting firm that helps leaders align people with organizational goals through assessment and feedback solutions, strategic planning and goal-setting tools, leadership development and coaching solutions, and team, retreat, and event facilitation expertise. For more than 20 years, Kat has worked with leaders in organizations with 150,000 plus employees and budgets of more than $5 billion, in addition to many smaller businesses. Additionally, she's presented, facilitated, and trained more than 10,000 participants in various leadership topics, keynote addresses, team sessions, board retreats, conferences, and organization-wide events. Kat's an adventurer at heart and loves the outdoors, her 2 children, her adoring husband, her chocolate lab, and living in sunny San Diego. She's currently working on her pilot's license with the end goal of flying a biplane. Fun fact, she's the youngest of 5 sisters and grew up in the Chicago suburbs, is a USC Trojan, and has rafted the Grand Canyon 14 times, which, welcome, Kat.
Thanks, Michelle. That was quite the intro.
I'm so glad that
Good
you put
reminders.
that in there. And it just brought me back to the first time I met you at our mastermind group. And we were talking, and I was telling you how much I love nature and the outdoors. And you threw out
That's
the
right.
idea of doing a retreat in, some natural, beautiful place like Yosemite. And it's so funny because I had no idea until I just read this that you were actually such a nature person. So
That's funny.
I
I
thought
think
that.
we actually talked about coaching hikes or something, didn't we?
Yes, we
That's
did.
right.
And you were
Oh
just
gosh.
full on trying to help me without any indication of all of this adventure that you had going on in your life. So,
Oh, that's
anyway,
really
that's really
fun.
cool. Well, welcome. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you. I am too. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, so I can't wait for people to share in some of what you provide to business leaders because you're really in the midst of everything that's going on right now. You're working with leaders who are having a lot of different challenges, and so I'd love just your take on kind of what's going on out there. If you're a business leader today and you feel sort of isolated and alone, what are you experiencing with the people that you're working with?
Yeah. Well, to give you a good idea, I'm heavily engaged in several different aspects. So whether it's working with the CEO to kind of create the culture and organization that they're driving to not just create, but continue to keep thriving throughout these challenging times, as well as one-on-one really strong work with human resources professionals,
Mm-hmm.
as well as then individual coaching work. I've had a lot of leaders coming to me over the last 8 months with some real interesting themes around overwhelm and all kinds of challenges that are related to COVID. So I'm kind of in those three areas really heavily right now. Also working a lot with boards and the dynamics there that boards are having challenges with.
Mm.
Bringing on good talent is probably issue number one for every organization out there right now. Very competitive landscape, not a lot of good talent in really specific areas that they're looking for. And that drives kind of a cycle of overwhelm and a whole system of lots of stuff, lots of juggling going on right
Mm-hmm.
now, where on top of all of that is this lovely layer of COVID and
Yeah.
what's happening, what's going on, what's coming up next. It's
Yeah.
a lot of scenario planning and being asked to do things that we haven't really been asked to do potentially ever, and then having to do it over and over again for a long period of time. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
real stress.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a little more about the overwhelm because, of course, the leader is supposed to be the one, obviously staying calm and guiding the ship and making sure that everyone else is at least my thinking is making sure everybody else can stay confident and calm. And so are you seeing what's the energy out there and kind of how are they bringing everyone with them into the overwhelm, or are they trying to not do that? How do you approach that? I mean,
It's a
hopefully
great,
we have leaders listening who can
yeah,
relate to
that's a
this.
great question. And here's what I'll say. I mean, luckily, the leaders that I'm involved with who are in that state of overwhelm have actually reached out for help.
Yeah.
And either they've reached out to me or someone like me personally, or they've reached out internally and been able to get that help. So the good news is they have help that's not
Yeah.
necessarily internal, right? And in that case, I think in a lot of ways they're buffering their teams from what's going on with them personally, but their challenge, and literally every single person that I'm working with right now, the level of work overwhelm they can't really protect their people from, and when they
Mm-hmm.
try, that just exacerbates their own overwhelm with working 2 or 3 levels down, which isn't really helpful at the moment because you really have to keep your head up high when you're a leader and you have to be able to see what's coming and do a lot of that heavy duty strategy work. So when they're entrenched, they don't have time to breathe, let alone look forward. So I think that's kind of what I've been seeing as a theme. I think the other thing is when you're overwhelmed as a leader, it's really hard for you to help others, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the oxygen mask first.
Right.
You can't breathe.
Yeah.
You're supposed to help somebody else breathe.
Yeah.
And so their teams are feeling it just as much as they are. And that's where I think that the real crush has happened with they have to reach out and get some help themselves in order to get through it. So it's
very interesting, because the job market being what it is, if people are feeling too much stress at work, they can leave and get another job fairly easily. So are they concerned about that?
Well, they're dealing with that on their teams a bit, but also that's 100% half of what they're contemplating when they're talking to me, as you probably know, right? By the time they're talking with somebody for help, they're like, should I leave? Is there something better out there for me? Is there something where I wouldn't feel this way anymore? Getting through this kind of messy middle right now is kind of a tough place to be. And the question is it really better anywhere else? Then you're in a new job, right? Or in a new business, taking on new things in addition to the overwhelm that we all have right now.
Right. Oh, so interesting. I actually hadn't thought about the leaders themselves wanting to leave. So these aren't necessarily founders of their own business. These are people who are in leadership roles in organizations.
Right. A little bit of both. So the leaders who are actual founders, like they're actually CEOs and or founders, they're not so much wanting to leave, obviously, but they're contemplating how to manage those with overwhelm. I mean, well-being and self-care has been a major theme really since the beginning of COVID. So that's been over a year and a half. I think we were probably entering that conversation before COVID happened. And so at this point in time, how do I take care of myself when everyone else is needing so much care too? So they're really at the founder level, they're dealing with issues like, how do I readjust? How do I reorient how we do things so that maybe we don't need to lean on as many internal resources? Or how do we readjust what we're selling and how we're selling it, what our processes are for delivery, so that we don't have to do things the way we've been doing them. So there's a lot of change in that too, and being able to get the help that they need to have the right conversations without having conversations with people who are going to be more stressed and worried because of that kind of change. Those are some of those real issues there at the higher level.
Yeah. And, with super interesting with respect to hiring, what are people finding? And, it's always interesting to have this conversation, because there are people out there looking for jobs and having trouble finding the jobs. And so they hear this and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I've been looking for 10 months now. But there is a real challenge right now in finding good talent, like you said. So is it the, what's within that definition of good talent? Where's the gap there?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from a founder perspective, or I should just say a CEO perspective, which then trickles down into any level of leadership that's hiring as well as HR, is the need for those who are coming in for jobs to be able to see themselves as related to revenue building activities. So
interesting.
When you're in it for, there's a lot of change going on right now in terms of what employees are demanding in the business world, in their work environments. And while all of that, I mean, I'm a big fan of it all. I think we've all been waiting for a lot of these changes for a really long time. In terms of, more humanity at work, more flexibility, all of these things. But at the end of the day, it's a business. It's meant to make money. And if we're not making money, we can't have people working here, right? And so that's a part of the language that those who are interviewing aren't necessarily speaking. It's more about, what am I going to get? And that's a big part of the conversation. As you know, from coaching people, you want them to be thinking in terms of, is this the right environment for me? Am I going to fit in? What's the culture like? What are the work benefits that are going to benefit me like here? And at the same time, when you're interviewing, they need to hear, how are you going to help that bottom line so they can offer those things? So I think that's kind of one of the challenges. They're not hearing it in a lot of the interviews. And so if you're not directly related to a revenue generating kind of line item, finding an opportunity to speak to that, or just even ask questions, how do we bring in revenue so that we can continue to offer programs and options that employees want? It just shows them that you're thinking in terms of those real challenges in terms of running a business. And I think when they hear those things, that's in alignment with the language they're speaking every day in their budget meetings and in their strategy sessions, and it's much easier for them to see you as a fit with where they're going.
Yeah.
And when those conversations don't happen in an interview, that leaves them questioning, what kind of employee are you going to be? Are you a short timer? Are you in it more for yourself than you are in it for the company? And I'm not recommending that you be in it more for the company than yourself, but 50-50 might be good.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm finding this really fascinating because this is part of the coaching, is particularly when you're, when you're figuring out what it is that, you can bring to an organization and being able to communicate to that to them, that it does have to be about them. And as much as they want you to be happy, I mean, like you say, there's got to be a good business reason for them to hire you. And so to kind of have that in your awareness, what it is that you want as a candidate, but really to be explaining to them what you can do to help them with their growth.
Another thing I would say with relation to being a tough market in terms of finding a new position is finding ways to really showcase your flexible and adaptable nature in terms of learning new things now more than ever before. I mean, obviously we've moved well past being in a time in history where we constantly need to learn new things, but right now more than ever before, we really do. And I think we've seen a lot of fallout from that in different professions over the last year, where if you didn't adapt, you either couldn't keep the job, or people would decide to depart their jobs because they didn't want to have to change. Right. But at this point in time, I think being able to show that you want to learn, that technology is such a huge part of how we do things, and even orienting yourself to thinking that way, asking questions, understanding how you can try new ways or bring conversations to the table to consider new ways. That kind of process improvement is kind of where we are right now, right? So thinking in terms of how do we change things? How do we get people on board with change? Being a person that's on board with having to change, all of those can really play a good role in finding a place where you can add value, and that they'll see you for that.
Right. Oh, I love that so much. And actually that speaks to the person I was speaking to at the beginning of the show about her reach job. And part of why it was a reach was because there was it was in a great growing industry, but some of it was something she knew, like sales, but then there was a very large tech component that actually made her very nervous. But to go into that and have all of those pieces, there'll be a learning curve, but it's going to benefit her in the long run so much, because you have to look at kind of where we're going. And very, very interesting. Growth it's always been something that I enjoyed, so it doesn't feel like a thing to me so much. It's just part of my everyday operation. But people really do need to be consistently learning and growing. And like you say, today more than ever. And, choose your own interests to grow in and learn about, but there has to be that continual growth at this point. There's no stopping and just doing the same thing.
Yeah. And I think that just to speak to that for a second, I think it's a real issue for people. And I think this is one thing I work with leaders and CEOs to understand, is that what COVID did to us was putting so much more of that work burden on us while we're working, right? Not just women, but men and grandparents and everything, right? And I think that the reality of kind of the commingling of work and home, that is something that's not really leaving. It's something that people have kind of asked for, and whether you're a full, like, I want to work home all the time, or I'd like kind of the option to work home and be a little bit more flexible, those conversations are all on the table and all working themselves out right now. And at the same time, that is an extra stress in and of itself, right? Not getting out to go do the drive to work.
Right.
That's creating overwhelm for people because you don't have that debrief time.
Right.
Not being able to literally walk down the hall to go to a meeting. And I literally have had some success with clients where they have to take a short walk around the house real quick before they have another meeting. Like literally silly things, right? But the way our days were normally structured actually helped us quite a bit. and we're not getting any of those buffers anymore. So being really creative in how you help your workforce to create those buffers, even if they are at home, and having those conversations, which is where that kind of blended, we call it human at work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually those conversations are off the limits. I'm not going to tell you what to do at home, but
Right.
right now I'm working in your home. You're working in my home, right? And so we need to have some of those conversations, and it's not directing people, but it's more having conversations about what's working for you in terms of getting some downtime, what's working for you in terms of the number of meetings or the number of visual Zooms versus just phone calls. All of those different pieces are heavy conversations in the workplace right now. And it's important for everybody to be contributing to those so that we can kind of figure out a way to settle into new normals in whatever office spaces that we're in.
Wow, I love that. That's so interesting. And who is the right person or department or group to be having those conversations? Because I'm hearing that everybody needs coaching right now. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
for real. For real.
Yeah.
So honestly, I mean, start with your direct, whoever you report to directly, but also human resources.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who's in a leadership team is having these conversations. So they're not having them. They might be trying not to have them, but knock on the door, send the email, bring it up on phone calls. Anytime, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say phone calls, Zoom calls, whatever they are, whenever you're in a meeting, whatever that might look like.
Yeah.
Having those conversations. One of the big things that we're starting to see, but it'll be happening more and more as more people go back into the workplace fully, is how do you Zoom in the people who aren't there?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of hybrid meeting, right, where some are in person and some are not.
Yeah.
That's always been a challenging meeting. Zoom at home kind of worked better because everybody was in the same spot, right?
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of comes back into play. And those who are at home are going to start to feel a little bit more left out or a little bit less able to participate in those conversations. And we're going to have some impacts from that as well. So there's a lot going on. You can see where the overwhelm comes from, and that is where everybody is benefiting from coaching for sure, because having somebody to talk to, just to talk through the things you want to have conversations about, is really huge.
Yeah, that's a super interesting point about the people at home. When people start going back, you might be thrilled with the option to be able to stay home, but there is that that concern that you will be left out of, both some of the work information and also some of the fun of, when everybody's going out after work together, so there's a little bit of kind of an emotional, psychological component to that could really impact your work experience.
Definitely. And something to think about too, if you're considering moving to a new position and you want to be virtual, right? There's a lot of kind of jobs opened up where you don't have to be in one place. There's kind of this movement to, hey, work from anywhere, we'll hire you, access to a whole new market of people, which is great, but you are missing that in-person component. So what does that mean? And how do you deal with the trade-off there? What mechanisms can you put into play to create opportunities to meet up with people in different ways that aren't just work related? And that's another challenge, I think, with the state that we're in right now, is so much of our time is taken by constant media. There's so much going on right now that all the time is spoken for. So taking an hour or even 30 minutes to just have like a happy hour or a coffee chat where it's just for fun really is extra. And actually, I was just on a phone call this morning with a board member who was talking about conferences. This board puts on educational conferences all year. And they used to be in person. And he was talking about how they did a lot over the last year to do virtual conferences and create space for people to come together. But he's like, I'm going to be honest. I'm sitting at home. My wife's there ready for me to eat dinner. Do I really join the virtual happy hour, or do I go hang out with my wife?
Yeah.
So that's a real choice you're making when you're not away. When you're away at a conference, of course, you're going to go hang out afterwards, because what else do you have to do?
Right. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Do you find that the biggest challenge is this kind of, virtual versus non-virtual, or are there other things as well? Because that's a huge one. And you're right, it takes up a tremendous amount of time and energy just figuring this out and working different scenarios. What else right now is kind of a prominent challenge?
Well, I think you either have overload, right, in terms of businesses who are really booming right now.
Yeah.
Sometimes booming and not able to get things they need to do their work.
Right.
Supply chain stuff. So that is overwhelming in terms of just volume of workload. Taking things on where you may not have the talent up front, and so you're kind of loading the talent after the fact. Winning contracts and stuff that you kind of suddenly have to fulfill. And so a lot of that has hit the ceiling over the last 6 months or so. That's causing a lot of stir. And then the other opposite of that would be not doing so well right now and having to figure out new ways of doing work or new products or services to offer, or how to offer them in an entirely different way. And that in and of itself, I mean, that's almost like creating a whole new business while things aren't going well, which is the worst scenario, right?
Right.
Hard enough to do that when things are going well.
Yeah.
And you have you've made a decision to go that route and you've got the money to do it. Right now, you're really challenged to figure out how to stay afloat and stay alive when you're not able to do it in the way that you've been doing it, or it might be a while before things come back for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're talking to these leaders who are having these challenges, is the conversation as much about, I mean, there's obviously the component that's about business and what should they change and how should they change it, but is it also personal, just how to handle the ups and downs and just the personal aspects of this?
Yes, I think that took a little while to come to a head, honestly. But I viscerally want to go to my stomach on that one, because it's kind of like the ulcer hit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These guys have been dealing with so much and just kind of going with the flow as much as they could. And now it's kind of like, oh my gosh. And it's amazing. I'm sure you've felt it up where you are as well, where with everything kind of coming back full swing into open mode, there's a lack of talent in terms of restaurants, for example, right? So I was just at one yesterday, and it was a profoundly awful experience just because of staffing.
Yeah.
I've been into restaurants where half the restaurants close down.
Yeah.
And they have one tiny little room, and then there's an hour and a half wait, like, what in the world? So dealing with that, what's the hope for them? When is it coming back? How long do I keep the lights on, hoping that eventually they turn bright again?
Right.
And we're seeing some smaller businesses close down for that, for sure. I have not had any yet with people that I'm working with, but I know you can see them shutting down, and that's just because you get to a point where either you've gotten to the place where you're ready to retire, or you can sell, or you just want to pursue something different. Worst case scenario, you're losing money and it's not worth keeping anymore, and that's a really hard place to be. I think we have yet to see all the settling out of that, but there's all that going on. And then that kind of the ulcer part is what I'm talking about with that personal piece, which is this the life I want to have? Right. I didn't go into it for this, right? No, who went into their business for a pandemic?
Right.
Talk about scenario planning. That was not a scenario anybody was planning for.
Yeah.
And it's kept us holding our breath, 3 months at a time, maybe. I've found 3 to 4 months to kind of be that window of, we'll just get through this and kind of go on. And here we are on the precipice again of, is this really going to keep working to stay open or not? And I'll call it round 2 as terms of like a big 2. Yeah. If things shut down again, how do you mentally get through that? Yeah. Because coaching can only take you so far. When your business is legitimately failing, right? I mean, you're really going to have to consider options.
Yeah, it's so interesting because the demand for, the restaurant industry is such a great example, because we all want to go out to dinner now. The amount of customers is, I don't know if it's at an all-time high, but it sure seems like, people want to go and eat out and aren't too worried about how much they're spending. Even it's just like, let me out of my house and go outside to dinner. But not being able to find the help is so interesting. And it speaks to a whole bunch of other issues under the surface as well, because
absolutely. Yeah. Type of work and
the pay.
And that's actually, I think, where the real conversation needs to happen. You know, for example, I was in a restaurant yesterday where the line was so long, and it wasn't until after I waited for forever and was frustrated and yet really understood their scenario,
Right.
that I sat down and I saw the sign that said, "You can also sit at your table and order through the thingy code, the QR code," right? And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" I was trying to order online while I'm in line, and the phone's not allowing me to, right? And I missed the sign. So there's such a need to really be environmentally aware of where things are posted that you need to know. Mm-hmm. But from a business perspective, how are you communicating to people about what their options are? How are you training people on what those options are? Not just your staff, but your customers, right?
Great point. Yeah.
And how can we keep this into play? You know, where I was thinking, why don't they have kiosks here? So I could just order, you know, there could be 12 of us ordering at the same time. Yeah. Obviously kitchen staff is an issue too, and having enough people to actually supply the food. Yeah. But that's just one example that we all can connect to, because we all eat at restaurants to some degree. Every business needs to be having those kinds of conversations. What are we doing for our employees? There was one woman taking these orders. And at first she was kind of slow in pace. Mm-hmm. And at first I was kind of like, could you speed it up a little bit, you know? And then I watched her, and she was cool as a cucumber. And I thought, she could be flipping out right now with this line of customers who eventually are going to start yelling at her, right? And she just kept her cool, managed the whole process, and she was just doing her thing. It gave you a personally great experience when you interacted with her. And I thought, wow, there's a message there, right? How do you get more talent like that who can actually thrive during a really challenging situation? Mm-hmm. And at the same time, how could she bring up a conversation about what she needs to be able to get through those moments and maybe be able to serve more people? If she had somebody helping her get drinks, right? There's 14 different solutions right there that could have made things more efficient. Is anybody having those conversations?
Right. And I think that speaks a bit to what you were talking about, is people having that kind of CEO time where they can, you know, not be working on the actual work in the business, but working on the business. And if you can step away and be looking at it like you were looking at it, you know, what amazing things could you come up with? It's also making me think, you know, people got so creative and so innovative when they needed to, you know, pivot at the beginning. And so people can't, I mean, now I love the outdoor spaces some of the restaurants and places around me have created. I don't want them to go away. I enjoy those more than the way it used to be. And for a period, people were really, you know, going gangbusters figuring those things out. Then when we thought we were going to go back to normal, I think some of that innovation stopped, and maybe it needs to just be an ongoing kind of way of being.
Yeah, that's a great point. Kind of the ebbs and the flows. When you're called to action, you can do amazing things. Yeah. And I hate to say this, but I think we all have a little bit of a tendency to kind of sink back into status quo mode, right? Which is the easy way. Yeah. And it's not because we're lazy. It's because we're kind of wired that way. Like we need a break, or we're handling so many things. And I think if we think about that in terms of this whole last year and going forward, how do we help each other have that kind of calm mode here and there, but still continue to rise for that call to action and have more call to actions more frequently? It doesn't have to be like emergency all the time, right? Right. It can be just kind of, hey, once a month or once a quarter, we're going to have these opportunities for everybody to really do some problem solving, some ideation sessions where we just bring ideas out on the table, or have a day where, you know, once a quarter, every employee has to live the life through somebody else's eyes, whether it's operations or a customer or whatever, you know, getting outside of your own experience into somebody else's experience. Right. Really not only opens your own mind frame up, but then also helps you to provide feedback to them in a way that they can see it differently as well. Right.
Right. Yeah, I love that, actually. I mean, that would be a great new sort of standard to set, and hopefully people will learn that from this. I think that's really smart. One of the things you said before we got started was that you were feeling, you know, despite the fact that we're talking about all these challenges, that you were feeling a sense of promise out there. Can you just speak to that? Because that's heartening.
Yeah. Yes, I will. I will say, as much as I'm kind of, okay, so I'm a futurist I always am thinking of the future and kind of probably risk mitigation to a certain extent, right?
Okay.
What's going to happen and how do we prepare for that?
Uh-huh.
Not everybody's wired that way. But because of that, I'm always looking at 2 or 3 scenarios at a time. And I'm surprised at how little there is of the negative scenario planning. Most people are really thinking of, we're reopening, we're going back to normal, everything's going to be great. And I think we see that in a lot of spending, consumer spending, a lot of, the housing prices are booming. There's inflation going on for sure, but beyond that, people are still making moves.
Right.
They're not being cautious. And I'm seeing that with everybody that I talk to. Nobody's doomsday. Everybody is really feeling very positive about the future. They're starting to embrace work opportunities. And actually, I just saw a report on that this morning about, was it 4 million people? I'm trying to remember which month this was. 4 million people quit their jobs in June, I think it was.
Wow.
It was like a record number of people quitting their jobs. So take note of that. Yeah. It means they have more confidence to go find a new gig.
Right.
So we're seeing even more movement, which can be a good thing. And that's fairly common, right? With recessionary type catastrophic environments where people really hunker down for a little while because you don't want to be the first guy that was hired or the last guy that was hired, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, with that movement comes a lot more change, right? So, and I've been coaching quite a few people through a transition to a new job, which that's been fun during virtual times to get to know a whole new organization and never having anywhere to show up. But there's going to be more and more of that where people are having to adjust to new environments and their environments are having to adjust to them not being there as much, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That was something too that we had touched on about company culture and how cultures are having to just either improve themselves or do something so that people, when they're making these choices, have a better reason to choose that company. What are you seeing in regard to that? And is it hard? Is it hard for a leader to figure that out?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I do see quite a bit of hesitation to really tackle new ways of doing things. Probably because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. But at the same time, there's a lot of conversations going on and there's a lot of push. So I don't see those going away. I think it's just going to take a little bit longer than some of us would like. Those who are pushing, right, are going to be waiting a little bit longer to have those policies come into play. There have been more movements on flexible policies because that's obviously needed right now. And how to operate in a flexible environment, especially when you do have some needs for people to be in office or serving people face to face. But we also have seen more movement on culture overall. So what do we want the culture to be here, right? What do we want it to be like to work here? And obviously that comes out of a lot of the diversity work, the diversity inclusion conversations that are happening on top of flexible workplace, on top of who are we now? Because we're not who we were before.
Right.
And those conversations all take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And I think that's where kind of that rubber hitting the road gets a little tricky because taking the time right now is actually a really difficult thing to do. So unfortunately, I'm seeing a little bit more fly by the seat of our pants or do one thing here and we'll get to the rest of it later, or they're doing little things while having the bigger conversation, which is probably the best we can hope for, is that those conversations keep going and we keep engaged in those. But it's a lot because there's a lot of change that needs to happen. And ultimately the people involved aren't really all that different, right? We're all still the same people. We're just talking about our needs differently and we're seeing each other's needs a little bit differently as well. So I've seen a lot of giving though. This last year, a lot of generosity for different kinds of, I want to say perks, but the more short-term perks that are helpful, right? A little extra time off, take Friday afternoons off because we're just overloaded. The 6-hour workday has been really successful in some environments where they just said 6 hours and that's it. We're not going to try to do a full day. And they've had a lot more success with that because 6 probably turns into 8 all the time anyway. But at least it's not 8 turning into 12.
Yeah.
Right. setting common expectations where everybody is on the same page. So I think that's one of the tricky things in kind of the new culture that people are asking for. This flexibility piece means we have to really respect each other when we're off or out. So I can't tell you, I had 4 different people in tears with me in the last few weeks trying to get on their vacation, and literally not sure if they could leave, not sure how they were going to not work the whole time. And a lot of that is because when you're going on vacation, nobody else is paying attention to your vacation time, right? They're still in their own world.
Yeah.
So how do we commonly come together and really help somebody take the time off? Because by the way, if I don't get that kind of accommodation, how can I do it for you? Because I'm not going to keep track of your time because I didn't even get it myself. Right?
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah.
The other thing I will say is purpose. I had kind of mentioned this to you before too, but one of the things I've been able to do, whether it's the big picture culture conversation, kind of like who are we now and where are we going and who are we going to be, but as well as the individual conversation, whether it's directly with the CEO or with a high level leader who's having their own overwhelm, burnout, and contemplative conversations, is really hunkering down on the core of who you are. What is your purpose? You yourself or your business. What's the purpose? What are you driving for? What outcome is going to be what you're really driving to? And using that, I mean, the North Star has never been more important, right? Knowing what you're going for and being able to always bring the conversation back to that, and always being able to make decisions accordingly that are going to be beneficial to yourself as well as others. That can really not only help yourself to kind of go where you need to go and clear out the noise and reduce the overwhelm, but it also helps get everybody together, rallied around that, and kind of back oriented in the same direction. And more willing to make accommodations that make a lot of sense for the whole, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. When people are aligned with a common purpose and they're motivated by that, and it's aligned with their values, it's much easier to put in the time or, make certain sacrifices or, whatever the need might be. So, yeah, I love that. And just that idea, both individually and as an organization, to continually be connected to purpose and what is that, and be working on defining that and communicating that. So that's beautiful.
Big times, Michelle.
Yeah, I know. I do love, though, the whole idea that that's the way the world is going. Because this conversation happens a lot, and this reminder, even with individuals in career change, what is their purpose, and what kind of company are they looking for that has a purpose that matters to them? So this idea of purpose has always been out there, but it's, sometimes it's been more, I guess, just rhetoric than, I don't know, something that is really deeply felt. And I feel like it's becoming more so now, and maybe COVID was good for that, at least.
Well, when it comes to humanity at work, which is a big conversation today, I think what we are all looking for, no matter who you are or where you play a role, is the ability to be you, right? To be the most you that you can be, and to have the best life that you can have.
Right.
And if we all lean into each other in that way, if I'm more curious about you, Michelle, what makes you come alive? What kind of life do you want to have? Who do you want to be? Who are you?
Yeah.
And you're asking me the same things. We're meeting at a whole different place than just at work doing our actual jobs, right? And then that's a place where people want to be and want to work together and want to work through the challenges that are ahead of us. So the companies that are doing that with their cultures, where they're really bringing you, yourself, and you into each and every conversation, that's where we're seeing people at least being able to hunker down and get through. And they're not spending half of their time or half of their brain power thinking about what are the other options or looking at what are the other options, because they know this is where they want to be.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. So that level of engagement is super important, because especially when people are overwhelmed, if they're fully engaged and focused, that's a whole different situation than when they're spending their time, like you say, just fantasizing about where else they could be. And
Yeah.
I've been in that space. I know that that's not where employees are giving their all.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
No, and I will say, I mean, I'm happy that I can say every company that we're working with right now has made their people feel safe enough to say, hey, I need help, or hey, I'm having a tough time right now, or just at least being honest in the conversation about what some of the challenges are. And I can see that makes a world of difference. And to be able to tap into resources, whether they're internally or externally, makes a huge difference for helping people to get through those periods of time where they are challenged. And COVID or not, we all have those times, right? Whether they're it's a hard month or there's legitimately some serious stuff going on in our lives. And this last year has made that the common denominator.
Yeah.
We're all going through it at the same time.
Yeah.
But it's always going on for somebody, right?
Right. Oh, I love that. And I love that you can help leaders understand how to do that better, and the importance of making that a part of the workplace. Yeah, really fantastic. So can you tell us a little about how people can connect with you and, some of the ways they can learn more about what you do?
Yeah, well, you can probably go to the website. It's the easiest, energizeleadership.com. That's Energize with no D. We help you energize. And also you can feel free to send me an email. I'm Kat, K-A-T, at energizeleadership.com. So it's super simple. We have so many different ways that we help, but we're oriented to culture one person at a time, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. Culture comes down to every single person in the environment. And that's kind of what we're oriented to, is connecting the business itself and the goals of the business with every single individual in terms of getting there.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really creating an environment where people want to stay and don't want to leave. And so then you eliminate that hiring issue that is so difficult right now.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Kat, thank you so much for being here. I loved having you here. And I can see where you would be so helpful to people. I hope that people listening will connect with you and learn more about what you do, because bringing that kind of humanity into the work world is really something that is so needed. It's been needed for a long time. And I think the generations to come will only be able to work in that kind of environment. I mean, the people who could suck it up, in my day, those people are on their way out of the workforce. It's a new day.
So true.
So true. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here and continuing to do great work with companies and individuals.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This was great fun.
Good. Well, we'll talk soon, and I look forward to hearing more about, especially the positivity. Very happy to hear that, and that people are actually.
Well, we're all looking for hope, right?
Yeah, we are. So thank you
better
for bringing
days ahead.
Of that to the show. Yeah. Okay. All right, Kat. Thanks you.
Have
again.
A good one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And listeners, thank you so much for being here. We love doing this show. The Money and You show will air on ubngo.com on Mondays at 7. And then you can find it anywhere you find your podcasts, Apple Music and Spotify and all the places, as well as the Limit Free Life YouTube channel, Facebook page. We make it pretty accessible. So please tune in. Every week we do a tough love money tip, because we want you to improve your relationship with money and really meet some of your financial goals, whatever they might be. And this week, I think I'm going to just really harken back to what Kat was saying about knowing your purpose, because I really do believe when you're working in your purpose, you are energized to work and make things happen, and in turn, earn money from that. So continue to connect with careers that feel purposeful to you, or businesses that feel purposeful, and really make that a focus. And I do believe that the money will, obviously doesn't just fall out of the sky, but the money will come to you in a way that makes you feel really good about your life and what you're doing here on this planet, and bring joy to you as well, which is a big part of it. So if we're talking about humanity in the workplace, we need people to be happy with what they're doing and feel good about it. So anyway, thank you again for being here, and connect with me if you like. You can email me, Michelle, 2 L's, at limitfreelife.com. You can go to the limitfreelife.com website. I have some new free gifts there, a career change kit and something for entrepreneurs called 47 and a half of the best productivity tips you'll ever see, or something to that effect as far as the title. And so a lot of good resources there. And I'd love to connect with you that way as well through my blog. So have a great week. Don't forget to put those money tips on your calendar and start doing those 52 money tips during the year, and you will be in a really good place by the time you do them, if you do them. So please do. That's why we provide them. Okay. Take care. See you next week.